Yeah, so now we'll discuss about the risk factors which keep the patients with diabetes at higher risk for a poorer outcome. So they can be categorized into non-modifiable. I'm not going to discuss about it, or there may be partially modifiable. These are the entities, basically comorbidities, and these are the pre-admission factors. So one can control this, can try for a better metabolic control, so that if at all they catch an infection, so the outcome may be better. I will be focusing mostly on this modifiable risk factor. The whole goal is these are the admission factors which happen during the hospital. So it has been seen that even if patient has a good prior glycemic control as reflected via hemoglobin A1C, an acute hyperglycemia during the hospital stay can worsen the outcome, which has been very nicely reflected in this study. In this study from China
Saroj,
involving around
Saroj, sorry to
7,000
interrupt
patients,
you.
the authors
Saroj,
tried to
but
study
you have two devices
the
on.
the survival outcomes in patients who have well-controlled diabetes compared to that who have poorly controlled blood sugars. So the well-controlled blood sugar was between 70 to 180, and the poorly controlled blood sugar is defined more than 180 at any point during the hospital stay. And it was seen that those who had poorly controlled blood sugar have a poor survival. In addition, the secondary outcomes such as all-cause mortality, septic shock, ARDS, acute kidney and heart injury, the prevalence of all these were higher in the cohort who had poorly controlled blood sugar. Similar observations were noted from small studies showing this finding that acute hyperglycemia can also affect the outcome. So it is really important to control the blood sugar during the hospital stay. So how to control them? So before that, how to screen and monitor these patients? So the first thing is all patients, irrespective of their diabetes status, should be screened for plasma glucose. If there is a history of diabetes and patients are critically ill, they will require insulin infusion. So these patients may require blood sugar monitoring every 1 to 3 hourly. If they are not critically ill, the blood sugar testing should be done 4 times a day. These 4 times include all the pre-meals. Those are like before breakfast, lunch and dinner, and after dinner. All patients who have diabetes, a glycosylated hemoglobin should be sent to lab to know their prior glycemic control. Even those do not have history of diabetes, a random plasma glucose from the laboratory should be obtained. If the value is more than 180, the blood sugar testing should be continued 4 times a day, at least for 2 to 3 days, considering they may have pre-existing undiagnosed type 2 diabetes. A glycosylate hemoglobin may help in defining this condition. If it is more than 6.5%, and the blood sugars are beyond the cutoff, that means the patient has diabetes, but it was undiagnosed. If the random plasma glucose less than 180, then we usually monitor for another 2 to 3 days. If the blood sugars are less than 118 all reading, we do not stop the monitoring because this patient may subsequently have acute hyperglycemia, but the frequency reduced to 1 to 2 times a day. When we start the patients on steroid, which is the case almost all patients who are getting admitted, the blood sugars may shoot up. So the 4 times monitoring should be done at least for 2 to 3 days. If the sugars remain high, then appropriate therapy is started and the 4 time monitoring is continued. What are the glycemic goals? It depends upon the severity of the patient. If the patient is critically ill, the target should be between 140 to 180 milligram per DL, especially on insulin infusion. If they are not critically ill, the pre-meals and post-meal readings should be less than 140 and 180 milligram per DL. The attempt should be done to avoid hypoglycemia because it carries higher risk of mortality. And also for the healthcare worker to avoid frequent patient contact, several methods has been described, and many times we also follow these things. Now a brief overview regarding the treatment outline, especially different anti-diabetic regimens. I am not going to discuss the details of these regimens because of the limited time for this lecture. So in brief, the patient who was severely and critically ill, they require insulin infusion with 1 to 3 hourly monitoring of the blood sugar and titration of the insulin as per the infusion, as per the blood sugar. Those who have mild to moderate illness, then we see whether the blood sugars are adequately controlled at admission. If they are adequately controlled, even with their previous regimen, such as which may include a oral regimens or a insulin, which mostly include premixed insulin, such as 30/70 and 50/50 insulin, then we usually advise to continue the same regimen, and we advise certain caution for oral agents, which we'll discuss in subsequent slides. If the blood sugars are not controlled with this regimen, then we simply switch to a basal bolus regimen. If the patient is already on basal bolus regimen, we continue that with adjustment of the insulin doses. Anytime poor control with the oral agents or premixed insulin happens, then we switch to basal bolus regime. And if it is not controlled on basal bolus regime, then usually switch to insulin infusion. And finally, when the insulin infusion, patient's blood sugars are controlled and patient's hemodynamic is stable, we again change to basal bolus regime. Now I will discuss what is basal bolus regimen with some case example in the next slide. This was a 60-year male who was weighing around 70 kg, was admitted to our COVID hospital with history of fever, cough. He had hypoxemia at admission with elevated inflammatory markers, but the liver and renal functions were normal. At admission, the blood sugars are controlled. He had a good glycemic control, which is reflected by A1C. So as expected, he was started on the steroids, oxygen and heparin. So here we can see we continued his previous oral hypoglycemic agents because his blood sugars at admissions were normal. His liver and renal function tests were normal, and he was most importantly accepted fair amount of oral feeds. And we continue 4 times blood sugar monitoring, which were within target range. But on day 3, his blood sugar started to rise. So we switched the oral agent to subcutaneous insulin. So here I will demonstrate what is the basal bolus regime. So basal bolus regime contains a basal insulin, which is usually an intermediate acting insulin like NPH, or this may be a long acting insulin like glargine. And it also contains meal related short acting regular insulin. So here we calculated total daily dose like 0.7 units per kg body weight because we are directly involved. If there is expected to be a delay with endocrinology consultation, the residents there can start with lower amount of dose for say 0.4 to 0.5 units per kg. So that will be our total daily dose. So here with 0.7 total daily dose came to be 48. We gave half of it as basal insulin, that becomes 24 units. Of that 24, we gave 2/3 NPH in the morning and 1/3 in the evening time. And of the rest 24 unit, we divided them into 3 equally meal portions. So with this regimen and optimization as per the blood sugar monitoring, the blood sugars controlled and patient improved. And here in consultation with us, the patient was discharged on his previous regime. So the learning lessons here were acute hyperglycemia is quite common in hospitalized patients with COVID. This can be mostly because of the steroids or COVID infection per se. If blood sugars are controlled on oral agents and it is suits up during hospital stay, increasing the dose of oral agent is not advised because it will take some time. Previous oral regimen can be continued if all the criteria meets. One should remember steroid-induced hyperglycemia can be transient, so the resident should consult our team for antidiabetic medications at time of discharge. Otherwise, it has been seen patient discharge on higher dose of insulin or oral agents. This decision was taken because of the acute hyperglycemia in the hospital setting, but at admission, the blood sugar was fairly controlled, which was reflected by A1C. And we get some calls for frequent hypoglycemia in this patient. So the best way is to avoid all these things, attach these patients to our EOPD at time of discharge, and to advise them to call within a week or 2 weeks. So few words of caution if we are continuing oral agents in this group of patients. One should avoid sulfonylureas because they have higher propensity for hypoglycemia. So patients who are elderly, have deranged renal function, and who are on insulin, these agents should be avoided. Similarly, metformin should be avoided who are hemodynamically unstable or have renal and liver dysfunction or metabolic acidosis. All critically ill patients should avoid DPP-4 inhibitor. Otherwise, this is one of the safest category of oral agents in patients with diabetes in this setting. Other agents such as SGLT2 inhibitors, GLP-1 receptor agonist, and thiazolidine should be avoided in hospital setting. So this patient, I just want to highlight the amount of insulin required can be too high, and in such case, one should not hesitate to shifting to insulin infusion. This patient, in contrast to the case 1, had very poor control of blood sugar are reflected by high A1C, and at admission the blood sugars were really high. So oral agents is a big no for this patient, and he was started on basal bolus regime at the dose of 0.8 units per kg. We try to adjust the insulin doses, but one can see he required almost more than 200 units of insulin, but still blood sugars are not controlled. They remain in the range of 400 to 500. So this is an indication where one has to switch to insulin infusion, and this patient required almost 5 units per kg per day of insulin. This was more than 300 units of insulin. In a normal human being, the insulin requirement usually less than 1 unit per kg per day, ranging from 0.4 to 0.7 units per kg. So if you compare to that, this is very high insulin requirement, and this kind of insulin requirement are not uncommon. So I'll give a brief overview. What are the indications for two most commonly used insulin regime? One is the subcutaneous basal bolus, other is insulin infusion. So when the glycemia control is not achieved with oral agent or basal insulin or premix insulin, or if the oral agents are not safe to use, or in view of the steroid-induced hyperglycemia, if the patient is critically ill or have decay or hyperosmolar coma, insulin infusion has to be started. It has to be initiated if patient blood sugar are not controlled with basal bolus regime. Insulin infusion, one should consider only switching to basal bolus insulin only when the patient is stable and accepting orally or enterally. So in setting of NIV, the management hyperglycemia is very tricky, because the ideal way is to treat via insulin infusion, but frequent monitoring is an issue. Sometimes people try subcutaneous insulin, but when they try to feed the patient, many patients just desaturate. So the best way is there are special NIV masks are available in the market, but the availability is an issue. These masks are special for nasogastric tube, so they can keep the patient via subcutaneous insulin. Other situations like Ryle's tube and patients who are NPO, the regime just like a non-COVID regime, like for Ryle's tube feeding, one should give basal insulin, and regular insulin should be given before alternative feed. and who are nil orally, they should be given insulin infusion or a neutralizing drip with estrogen insulin. A few words regarding decay. I want to highlight that even the data are not widely available. It is shows that the ketosis or decay can be very high in patients with COVID-19, even in absence of diabetes. Traditionally, it has been seen that decay is seen in more with patients with type 1 diabetes, but this meta-analysis among patients with COVID showed that even most of the patients with type 2 diabetes can have this decay. So one should be very careful if the blood sugar more than 250 and it carries a high mortality rate. The management is not different from that patients without COVID, but one should be very careful regarding while administering the fluids because many of the patients may have ARDS, myocarditis, or renal failure, and they may require, in fact, very high doses of potassium and insulin. So finally, a few words regarding management of patients with diabetes who are at home isolation, who maintaining saturation. So the most important thing is they should maintain hydration. They should eat regularly. If the appetite is low, they should be advised to take small frequent meals. If it is still not possible, they should advise take carbohydrate-rich liquids and look for hospitalization. In addition, monitoring the oxygen saturation, they should also monitor capillary glucose 2 to 4 times a day, and they should check urine ketones if the blood sugar is more than 250. And if facility permits, their inflammatory markers and renal function should be checked. Coming to the medications, if patient is not unwell, all the oral agents can be given. And these agents such as DPP-4 inhibitors such as sitagliptin, linagliptin, they are found to be quite safe. The GLP-1 receptor agonist such as liraglutide is also found to be safe to use at home. One should be careful if giving metformin or SGLT2 inhibitors such as empagliflozin because if patient do not drink adequately, dehydration can ensue and the adverse effects of these medications can develop. Similarly, the elderly and the persons who are not eating adequately should avoid sulfonylureas because of increased risk of hypoglycemia. They should be instructed to contact healthcare worker for admission if blood sugars are really high, ketones are present, and general condition deteriorates such as development of hypoxemia. So this is to summarize the lecture. All patients should be monitored for the hypoglycemia, and management of diabetes can be really challenging. And high doses of insulin requirement are not uncommon, especially in setting of high dose steroid therapy. And the prevalence of ketosis and decay may be really high, so one should be very careful to monitor if the blood sugar should be beyond 250. And the management and glycemic targets, they depend on the severity of the illness. Thank you.